Okay, welcome back to Quick Concepts. This is Quick Concepts for Math 87, and today we are going to be talking about missing numbers. Missing numbers in addition, missing numbers in subtraction, multiplication, and division. So the way Saxon explains it's kind of weird. I don't want to do it that way, so I'm just going to show you just some different ways to work these out, okay? So I'm going to give you just a couple examples. This is just missing numbers with addition. Let's do that one first. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is just kind of take a step back and ask, well, what's really going on here? Well, we have two numbers that are added together to equal 75. So whatever that number n is, it's not going to be bigger than 75, right? Because we're adding it to another number to equal 75. So the first thing I'm going to tell myself is there is no way I'm adding anything to 75. Because we want it to equal 75, so we're not going to put a number bigger than 75 to add to it. I like to think of when you have missing number, add, answer, you're just going to subtract up. So n is equal to 22. The other thing is that you only have two options here. You're either going to add these two numbers or subtract them. And again, like I said, you don't want anything bigger than 75, so you're definitely not going to add them. So a lot of times it's good to take a step back and think common sense wise. Also, keep in mind you can check your work. If I plug that 22 in where n is, it should equal 75, which it does. Okay? Same thing here. Again, I'm not going to want a number bigger than 61, so I'm going to have to subtract, okay? So if we rewrote this like this, again, it fits with my whole subtract up. So 61 minus 26. Okay, so A is equal to 35. And again, please do not forget that you can always go back and check these, especially if it's on a test, just like that. This one, you want to get everything added up that you can actually add up. So here I could say, well, this is 7, and this is 15, and 7 plus 15 is 22. It just makes things a whole lot easier. So now, once again, I want to either add or subtract here. There's going to be no other operation, and I'm not going to add because I don't want anything bigger than 40. So I'm going to subtract. And please do not forget, you can always check your work to see if it's right. So that's missing numbers in addition. Let's look at missing numbers in subtraction. Okay. Now this one, again, you're going to take a step back and you're going to ask yourself, well, if I want to subtract 3 from it and get a 2, I'm obviously going to have a number bigger than 3. The only way I'm going to get a number bigger than 3 is to add. The other way you can think of it is when you are dealing with something like this and you have something missing on the top, you're going to add up. Okay? So I'm going to say 3 plus 2 is 5. Please don't forget that you can put that 5 in and check your work. This one, again, it's 5 minus something is 2. Well, I definitely don't want to add those numbers because if I add those numbers, I'm going to get something bigger than 5. So this way I would be subtracting down. And don't forget, you can check your work. And then lastly, this one's pretty easy. Hopefully you just realize you're just going to subtract. 5 minus 3 is 2. And that is it for that. Now what about multiplication and division? This is where the whole premise of algebra comes in. Algebra just means solving for the unknown, getting the letter alone, okay? Okay, now for this first one, pretty easy. 3 times 2 is 6. P is 6. This one's a little bit harder. If you think about it, we're saying 3 times F, and you can write it like this, is equal to 6. So we can't multiply 6 and 3 because that's going to give us a huge number. So the only other operation we can choose from is division. Okay? So one way to remember that is you want to go the opposite. We know that this is multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So if I wanted to isolate that F, I would divide both sides by 3. F is equal to 2. That is algebra in a nutshell. Removing everything next to the letter so you can get the letter alone. Again, it's 2 times 3. The opposite of multiplication is division. So R is going to be equal to 3. All right, let's try some a little bit larger. Well, that one's a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to have to come over here and I'm going to have to say 168 divided by 12. You don't start using a calculator in this book till the end of the book. So we're going to have to do a little bit in our head. So n is equal to 14. And again, if you wanted to go back and check your work, please do not forget that's always an option. And it matches. Okay, let's try another one. 7k is equal to 105. Do the opposite of what's going on, which is the opposite of multiplication is division. So k is equal to 15. And we'll do one more. This one looks a little bit different. I don't want it to make you panic. Go ahead and multiply what you can. Just like we on the addition one, we went ahead and added what we could. It just simplifies everything, makes it a little bit easier. Then you're just going to divide both sides. Okay, and then the last part we're going to talk about is numbers missing in division. So let's say you have something like this, something like this, and then something like this. So this first one's pretty easy. You're just going to ask yourself, well, what's 24 divided by 3? Well, that's n equals 8. The next one gets a little weird. It does. You can always step back on these simple ones and say 24 divided by what is 3? And just right away, hopefully you know it's 3. But you're going to get to a point where things get a little bit more complicated. So I want you to understand that the first thing we need to do to solve for m, because that's what we're looking for, is get it off the bottom. You're going to ask yourself, well, what's going on here? Division. So what's the opposite of division? It's multiplication. If I multiply both sides by m, I end up with this. Then again, what's the opposite of multiplication? Division. And m is 3. So again, I suggest you always go for the first part. Hey, if it's easy, I can figure out with what it is, then great. Same one with the next. Something divided by 3 is 8. Well, it's got to be 24, right? But let's say you can't, it's bigger numbers, you can't figure it out. We're going to do the opposite of division and multiply, and that is your answer. So let's do a couple more complicated ones. What divided by 3 is 15? And 64 divided by what is 4? So first of all, you can look at this and go, well, what divided by 3 is 15? It's going to be 45. But my suggestion is setting it up like this. And the reason I say that is because then you can do the opposite. It makes a little more sense. 64 divided by what is 4? Well, if you know your numbers, it's 16, but say we don't, and we've forgotten. Then I'm just going to divide both sides by 4. So B is going to be equal to, and you might have to come over here for long division. Like I said, you're not using calculators yet. It may be something like that that you have to do. And that is it on missing numbers.